I'm so happy and full of joy that I can today welcome Laura Kaestele to the Conscious Evolution Summit. And
Thank you for the invitation.
I'm especially excited because you are really representing the younger generation. I guess you are the youngest one in the summit. And that makes me especially curious because I really want to give you, representing the younger generation, the chance to share about your perspective on our process of evolution. And maybe we really just take all the listeners, the viewers with us on this journey, what you have found in your private life, in your study, in your working engagement, what you think is relevant to share about conscious evolution.
Yeah, again, thank you for the invitation. I feel really blessed and honored to be part of this summit, to be part of such an exciting group of speakers, and to have the opportunity to explore this topic of conscious evolution with you and every single person who is listening to us. And it already feels like evolution in action. You know, me as someone from a younger generation participating, building on all of the amazing research and work that so many of the other speakers and other people in the field have already done, and me being able to build on that and then move it to, you know, the application in my own life and work, and hopefully to the next level in this evolutionary journey. So for me, that's already an embodiment and a facet of what we're talking about right here. And I'm also, I really want to invite myself and everybody listening to take this opportunity to not just move this topic in our minds, you know, as a conversation, as a subject of study, but to actually move, like to let it sink deeper. So we move ourselves in relation to that topic of conscious evolution. And I think for me, that's already a practice to a more holistic, more integrated way of letting something work in you and in your life, and not just in your mind. So that's a warm invitation to everyone listening.
Thank you for this beautiful invitation. I mean, the whole summit is about that, really bringing that alive in us, becoming really sensing it in our system, wherever we sense it, where we get goosebumps, where we feel our heartbeat, where we feel something is really touched in us. And the whole summit is about really activating that in us. So I thank you so much that you really bring this into our awareness.
Yeah, and that is also like this indicator of aliveness, I think, is a really good one to keep in mind. And I think it will also kind of be one of the anchor points for this upcoming conversation, to sense in where do we feel that aliveness, because life is ever evolving, life is changing. And I think if we look at the history of our planet Earth, it's been changing so much, you know, so many billions of years of evolution, of change, of emergence, of new things, always, you know, moving towards higher complexity, higher creativity, expression of freedom, of new possibilities. And it makes me actually really humble also to see how such a short time we're just here on the planet. If you can take the whole history of the Earth within 12 hours, we as Homo sapiens are just here in the last 2 seconds. And to just take that as like, it's 2 seconds. and then the time where we really became so powerful and able to really shape the entire environment is just 1/10 of a second. So that stage, you know, where we have higher population, higher technology, higher abilities to influence the world around us, is such a short period of time considering the entire history of the planet, but it's been so impactful. And I think it's sometimes really helpful to like zoom out just getting the big picture to get a sense of where we're at and how we came here. And I think this is just like a short impression of that amazing, you know, millions and billions of year-long history that we share with the planet and all the other living beings.
Mm-hmm. And Laura, maybe you can share a bit about, because what just pops up when I listen to you, I also can sense a notion of tension, which is coming from, in one way, I can face challenge and maybe something what kind of makes me hopeless and where I feel really little. And on the other side, I can connect to excitement, to possibilities, to hope, to build something better. And it just came when I listened to you, and maybe it's just this invitation, if you want to take it and talk about that tension.
Yeah, I'm glad to. I think this is something that, at least from my life, is definitely something that's quite present and that I've become more aware of basically since I'm a teenager. It's probably been around for my entire life, but it wasn't in my, you know, awake awareness. But for several years, it's been like a research topic of mine, to sense into that tension, to learn different ways to, like, to some level understand it, but even more so to really be with it in a way that's supportive of myself and who I am, and also of what I do and the work and the projects that I'm engaged with. And actually kind of diving deeper also in this topic of conscious evolution, it really connected to me that it's basically like really natural evolutionary drives that are also kind of reflected in this kind of tension that I also feel, because basically evolution is driven by two ways. It can either be through difficulty, through challenge, through outside pressure, through certain life circumstances. You know, like millions of years ago when algae developed, before algae developed, there were lots of microorganisms, small little beings, and they were taking up all the resources. You know, they were propagating and growing and taking up all those resources to the point where they exploited everything that they had in their natural environment. So they had to evolve, and out of that came algae, the first living being who was able to do photosynthesis and use another kind of energy source, the sunlight, to live, right? So that's the kind of evolutionary pressure, the push that I'm talking about, that really creates such a necessity that you have to change. And I think this is also, I mean, relating that to my life and the world and what's happening right now, I think we've managed to create ourselves a context where our way of life, our way of working and relating to the planet has become so harmful and destructive that we are threatening our own survival with it. And that's like an outside life pressure moving us into evolution and driving it. And I think the other part, which I'm also very familiar with my entire life, is curiosity, is excitement, is inspiration, is an attraction, a sense of possibility that I think also probably every person, at least every person listening right now, can relate to. That kind of sense of something different is possible, and like an innate urge and joy in learning and exploring and researching, asking questions, and essentially evolving. So those are the two main drives: necessity on the one hand, or possibility on the other hand. And I think from my life and that kind of tension that you also mentioned, I think it's a combination of both, actually. And I can sense that if it's too much pressure from necessity, it becomes really daunting and hopeless. And I think that's the kind where these like horror world collapse scenarios kind of emerge, and that can be really frustrating and depressive. And then on the other side, connecting more to that kind of creative, inspirational drive in evolution, I think that's the one where we can actually have enough like freedom and creativity to actually be innovative and make a difference and try out new things and keep going no matter what, because life will keep going no matter what in some way or another. So that's kind of a very reassuring ground of, you know, life is changing, life is evolving, and it won't stop just like that. It won't stop with us. It won't stop with one planet. It's a bigger force and movement that's happening. That's part of the expression of life.
And on a very personal level, how would you describe how do you sense this force?
This evolutionary drive. Yeah, for me, I think I'm definitely one of those people who has a strong connection to that kind of pulling, attraction, excitement drive of evolution. And I noticed that just because I've always been really curious, I've always been asking questions, and I feel like an inner sense of movement towards something that I might not even know or be aware of, but it's something that just keeps me moving and taking one step after the other, you know, doing research, asking questions, engaging in conversations. And yeah, I feel it basically as an inner movement or pull that propels me forward, that, yeah, makes me take the next step. And it's something that's been part of my life in some way or another. Yes.
And the other question which arose is, you mentioned that with this tension, it's also about building up a capacity to kind of embrace it, to hold it, to move it, to be with it. And out of your experience, what supports you in that, or what can you see maybe can support us on an individual level in building this capacity?
Yeah, I actually want to kind of back up and first say like one or two sentences why I think it's actually important to embrace both, because they're basically the two poles of the tension, right? Like two extremes, two things moving. And I think it's really important to also have like an anchor and a connection to both of those sides. And I think if we, as I mentioned, if we just connect to the pressure and the necessity, it can really, you know, keep us in a spiral, keep us in hopelessness or apathy, encourage more numbing, more looking away, more business as usual. And I think if we only focus on the possibility and the excitement and what's great, we can lose a sense of groundedness, a sense of really like profound connection to what is. And we create like fantasy worlds of what we love to have, and you know, like it kind of starts removing us from the current reality, and that's not the intention behind it. So I think it's really important to kind of balance and be connected to both things, to be really deeply grounded in what is and build a capacity to be with what is, even if it's painful, even if we don't like it, even if we have values or ethics or beliefs that judge it as wrong, or that, you know, make us give us a sense of we want to change that, it's not right, to still be with it, because that's the foundation of reality. And by not being with it, we lose any kind of momentum for things to move to a different place, for things to evolve, for things to change. It really starts with a deep groundedness in what is, who we are, you know, what's present in our lives and in the world. And then at the same time, staying in connection with that sense of possibility, of excitement, of calling, of purpose, however you want to call it, and use that together to kind of create this creative tension, you know, to be really present, but to also keep moving, to keep learning, to keep changing, to keep doing, and to keep being in the world. And I think together is a really powerful, like motor and driver also for us to be human on this planet in this time of sometimes crisis, of pain, of challenges. So yeah, in some ways, like evolution needs this difficulty. And it might be hard, but it really helps to create that bigger capacity. And because you've asked, I think for me it's almost like making a bigger space inside of myself to be with paradoxes, to be with those, two forces, and to expand on a mental level, my horizon for perspectives, for opinions, for viewpoints, but also on an emotional level to expand my capacity to actually feel how it makes me feel, whatever is happening, and to expand my heart and my compassion to embrace all of that, to not cut things out that are maybe not so pretty or challenging me right now and who I am and how I want to lead my life, to include that. And also on my body level, to like physically make myself, spacious and flexible and mobile enough to be with that, to be able to hold a certain kind of tension, to hold certain kind of capacity for that. And I think on all those levels, it's really helpful to basically have that space and rather at least first be with it in stillness. And then from that, to move with it as well. So it's not about, holding it and being stuck with it. We can also really hold on to things in order to have stability again. So for me, it's rather a capacity to be present with things that are changing and allowing them to change, allowing them to move. So not blocking them out, but also not holding on to them, which I think are two possible pitfalls. We can also really hold on to either nice, but also to really painful things just because it feels more stable. So I think in either way, it's being with it, but also being with it in that kind of movement and having like an openness and a spaciousness and a flexibility in our minds, in our hearts, in our bodies, I think is really supportive.
And I also would like to add another dimension which you haven't mentioned yet, but I know that you are also aware of it, is in a way kind of also this inner exploration of what am I? So this exploration also in the invisible, where curiosity might also maybe go to find out what is it about to be a human. You mentioned the mental plane, the emotional plane, the physical plane, but there is also in the invisible, you could say the spiritual plane or the energy plane. Maybe you also want to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I think this is actually maybe the most subtle, but also the most anchoring plane for that kind of capacity for the evolutionary drive, for this creative tension on a more subtle and energetic level of being with it, of being in relationship with everything that's around us, with every person, every plant, every animal, all of the things that we created. And I think it also, like, at least for me, this is also a place that kind of gives me like information and energy and almost like guidelines of what's my place and my job to do in certain moments. So I think this is kind of like a way where all of this information and experience that maybe is also at least to big parts kind of coming from the outside, on that level it gets processed and creates more of an internal response of being with those things, of choosing or acting certain ways that I feel called to do. And for me, that comes from a more subtle place. It's not necessarily, like a thought just in and of itself, but it's another kind of movement that can guide our lives and in the world and what we're doing.
I mean, Benzeganti talked about evolutionary purpose, where he really made clear that it's then really about being connected to a call which is really beyond our personal life, which when we are really connected to that, we want to bring benefit to the collective. We want to contribute to something bigger. And maybe you can share a bit how you sense that connection and how you sense how it kind of comes to you or shows up, and how you just said there comes a certain kind of guidance as well from it.
Yeah, I think it's a nice term to use, that as like evolutionary purpose in a way. Yeah. And I think for me, it really marks a certain shift in our human development, from a more personal to a more transpersonal level, you know, from being focused. You can basically say it's almost, you know, we have all that technology and computers, it's like an upgrade, you know, like upgrading the software and the programs on your computer. And that's really necessary with technology, right? That's also always evolving and changing. And I think it's also necessary with our like human thoughtware, with our human programming, to like upgrade our systems regularly, so we're still capable and they're still very appropriate for the life circumstances that are changing so fast these days. And for me, there is really this shift from being more focused on like survival, on being adaptive, from almost like a defensive personality structure that is always in favor of what you already know, of what your beliefs are, of what you like, and obviously judging what you don't like and what you think is wrong or bad. And which is also like it completely has its place. I think it's especially important, you know, being born, being a child, you have to adapt and really be able to survive and adapt to the circumstances, to your parents, to your environment, in order to do that. And I think, unfortunately, most of us kind of stay with that programming, with that software, our entire lives. And it has limits, you know, it's like Survival 8.1, even if it's the most current version of its kind, it doesn't allow you to download evolutionary purpose. You know, it doesn't allow you to be your destiny in action. It doesn't allow you to create like thriving relationships, because those kind of programs, they just don't run on Survival 8.1. So at some point, this shift in the software really becomes necessary, you know, to shift to living or thriving 1.0. And then, you know, you integrate all the previous programs, but you also get access to those new exciting programs like the evolutionary purpose. And you can shift really from a more defensive kind of being to a more expansive one, you know, to learning, to evolving, to constantly growing. And I think that's this shift that's really necessary, and then enables us to also relate to very different ways to our own purpose, to our own work, to our life, to our relationships and communities, and also to the planet, I mean, eventually.
And Laura, what do you see, what supports individuals in doing this upgrade?
I think it's a really complex question. I would have loved if the answer would be as simple as downloading something from a website. You know, being a digital native like me, I think most of us in our generation, like in my generation, we're so used to just being able to open a website, to Google something, and to one click and download. I think, unfortunately, it's a little bit more complex than that for human beings, but nevertheless, it's a similar process of upgrading. And I think what really supports it is basically a kind of transformative or initiatory process, you know, that maybe starts when you're a teenager or a young adult, but that basically continues for the rest of your life, and that supports you to build more capacity for feeling, to build more structure for awareness and consciousness in everyday life, and to kind of increase your level of responsibility, of care, of creativity, and basically changes kind of your anchor points, you know, to people, to reality, to knowledge, to yourself, and moves them in a way that they create a framework that's more supportive of you in your next expression, in your next stage, you know, living your potential. And yeah, I think some key things for that are definitely learning to navigate the different aspects of what it means to be human that we've already mentioned, navigating your body, being in a way with it that you nurture it, that you treat it with care, that it really supports you. Also learning to navigate with your feelings and using the kind of energy that's in your feelings in order to give you information, to handle situations in your life, to heal emotional wounds. I think this is also part of the shift. It's also about redefining our relationship with our own thoughts and our own minds. To not be slaves of it, but to use them in a more intelligent and responsible way. And it's also what we've already touched upon, kind of like a new relationship with the universe, with the more subtle qualities, that allows you to get a better sense of your evolutionary purpose, your calling. And I think these are all different stages that need transformative process for every individual to go through, that need kind of a supportive community or peer group that really helps you to grow in those ways. And ideally at some point a whole culture that's embracing personal development, personal evolution, learning, expression, and growth, and really makes it as one of the core things of that culture, of that we. Because I think if the we is really embracing that kind of individual development and expression, it can really nurture the we to be also more powerful and more creative than if it suppresses the individuals, if it keeps them small and in certain in the survival 8.1 programming. It limits also our capacity as groups, as communities, as teams, as companies. Yeah.
And in your experience, could you share some examples of cultural we spaces which you found supporting in that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, as I said, I definitely see a relation between a kind of individual and a collective development and evolution. And I think they kind of need each other. You can only go so far as an individual, even as a very conscious, and committed and caring individual. And so at some point, I think we need also to come together in groups. I think the situation on the planet calls us to, and shows us basically the inadequacy of individual strategies and solutions. They're not going to be enough. We need to come together also on a different level, collectively, in groups. And for me, some of the most kind of inspiring or impactful experiences that I had is basically a few different things. So I've had, I think when I moved to a community, like an intentional community as a teenager, that was such a space for me personally. And there are thousands and thousands of communities and eco-villages around in the world, and they're evolving more and more. And I think those are potentially like really interesting collective spaces that can support our next evolutionary step as humans, and are really kind of like research and experimental like hubs for what a new way of living, of relating, of working, and of being with the planet could look like. And of course they're not perfect, like nothing is in evolution, but they're really great places and containers for that kind of development to take form, at least in in some way or another. So I think, yeah, both from a personal perspective, but then also considering the networks, those kind of intentional communities and eco-villages can be a powerful space for both individual and collective development. Because they kind of, they also, in some way, they create a higher pressure, like that evolutionary pressure that we talked about, because there's so much interaction and linking, and you share resources, you make decisions together, maybe you live together or you work on projects together. That creates both more links, but also more kind of like a rubbing, polishing effect that can both, you know, like be very confronting and challenging, but is also, again, that's like a pressure driver for evolution and for development. Same like in one-on-one relationships and partnerships, you know, like every little conflict or disagreement is basically just like this little notification on your computer popping up, like there is a new version of the software to download, you know, please click here and install it. So that's the same thing. And of course we have that much more with an increased level of interaction, with more close interaction. That happens much more. So yes, so communities are one place that can really support us in that kind of development. I've also found that any kind of like movements or networks that strongly are focused on kind of the individual like healing and development work can also be really supportive if they kind of form like communities of practices. That might be the integral theory movement, you know, that comes together as practitioners to exchange and learn. That might be movements around, you know, psychotherapy or different kind of tools that came out of more enough like a psychological understanding of who we are. Can also be one of the networks that I've been part of is possibility management, which is also really focused on that kind of like initiatory process towards being a more responsible, more conscious human being in the planet. And those different like training spaces, communities of practices that focus and provide different possibilities for learning and growth individually, but in this framework of exchanging tools, experiences, like supporting and holding space for each other. I think they're also a really great way to enable that. Mm-hmm. And to have an environment that's supportive of that kind of change and evolution, because also a lot of our current systems and structures and institutions, they really try to stick with the status quo, you know, and it's also like, I mean, we need a healthy balance between kind of structure and stability and then flexibility and change. Too much of either one can be really damaging. And I think life shows us that we need a healthy, like dynamic balance of both. I wouldn't be able to sit here if I wouldn't have any structure or stability. Like if I wouldn't have bones and cells and membranes, all of that like holding me together, I wouldn't even be able to sit here and talk, right? But if I would be so stiff and rigid, I wouldn't be sitting here either, because I would probably, you know, already died some way or another, because I wouldn't be able to move and change and adapt to the situation and environments that I'm living in. So yeah, I think we need a healthy balance of those. And I think there are increasingly more, you know, communities, teams, collaborative group, innovative businesses, you know, like new people and institutions that realize that we need a different way of coming together, of talking to each other, of really working together. Because this is what will support us in the next, you know, phase of evolution. This is what we need to do in order also to keep a healthy planet that's able to sustain life in the form that we know it right now. And I think, there's actually a big, partly maybe invisible, but actually really big movement of different, you know, small collaborative collectives of one way or another that work on that in many different forms, in many diverse forms, and that are increasingly interconnected. And I think this is actually a kind of a vision I see for the future, that this could actually become much more stronger, like a collective intelligence kind of happening by those, you know, like little cells and organisms and groups and teams connecting more and more, increasing the relationships and links and mutually beneficial relationships, which could become, you know, something like more of a collective intelligence and creativity that moves us and provides much greater possibilities than any one person could ever, you know, have and encompass and think of. So I think this is actually a very possible next stage of evolution for us collectively, as we humans are, you know, we are social beings, we are social animals, if you want, and that's a different way of coming together as social beings in a much higher, more complex, more inclusive way of collaboration that also has much greater possibilities to respond to the complex and chaotic circumstances that we currently live in. Yeah.
And when I listen to you, Laura, what also comes to my mind is this power of creativity. And also when you said when we are coming together, I sense that when we kind of, everybody brings his whole universe to a place and we meet there, we open up another level of creativity. And maybe you can share a bit your perspective on creativity.
Yeah. I mean, maybe first of all, I would say we're all creative. It's not just like a skill or a talent that some people have that maybe then become like artists or writers. It's something that's innately human. We're creating all the time, whether we know it or not. And unfortunately, we're doing a lot of unconscious, irresponsible creating, and we're not even ourselves. We're starting to not like the results of that. So I think it's urgent time to become more conscious of how we're creating all the time, and then really kind of align with and sync up and see what kind of intentions we have, what kind of results do we want to produce. Not that one way of creating or another is better. It's just let's check and stay on track with what we actually do want to create, and use that consciousness practice and that development to also be smarter in what and how we create. Because basically like every thought, every feeling, every word, every decision, every story, every action we do is if you want, so a creative act. There's something is not there and then it's there and we're creating it. The feeling is not there and then I create it and then it's there. So it is very much a creative aspect, like a thought, a story that we created. It wasn't there before, right? Or it maybe came from different pieces of stories, coming together. That's also creation. Using different parts and putting them together in new and exciting ways. So yeah, I think one key thing that I've realized is that we're all creating. We're all creators and we're creating all the time. And we're creating also our own lives and also the world around us. So in a way, there's not, I don't believe that there's like a set path for individuals, or something that's decided and that's your destiny and then it will just happen and run its course. I think we're creating the path that we're walking on every single moment, with every thought and decision and feeling that we have. And it's not there before. We're creating it as we're walking it. So in that sense, I think life is improvisation. And improvisation is being creative, right? And I think the same is true for us coming together as groups or societies and how we relate to the world. We're also being creative. And I think if we kind of can combine what you said, like individual talents, skills, thoughts, creativity, and create kind of like group and team spaces that sync those things up and connect them, we get an even higher potential of creativity, of possibility, of innovation. So I think that is a very exciting aspect. And I think part of also my studies and my work as a designer is very much around exploring how we can be creative together in teams. And I found a few different things that really help us to do so. Mm-hmm. And I think the first thing is something I've already mentioned, the kind of relationship and connection we have as individuals in a team or in a group. It's really important because in a way we are a social system, maybe not so well functioning, but we can be better functioning if we increase the connection and the links and the relationship between each individual part. That's already what we found out how it works well in nature, in systems theory, is that if we have increased connection, there is a higher possibility and likelihood of synergies. And I think this is one part that's essential in how we can be more creative also in groups. Is having that kind of high interconnection and a space where synergy becomes possible, where the whole is more than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm. And on a practical level, how would that look like, building up or being mm-hmm. more aware of that connections?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think one thing that I really liked that a friend of mine said was that the kind of like the sense of community or teamwork is basically highly influenced by the weakest connection between two individuals. And that really sets like the limit of what the group is able to accomplish together. And I think putting that into practice, what it means for me is that I can, as a facilitator or space holder or just like active participant in a group, I can provide opportunities for individual people to connect. And I think a great start is to connect to the one person in the room that you have the least connection, that you know the least, maybe that you even have some tension or conflict with. Because if you can come together with that person and be in connection and being in exchange, it can, move the whole group capacity up to the next level. Because if the individual connection is not there, it will limit what the group is able to achieve together, what kind of, energy and creativity it can generate. So I think one way is to find spaces for more authentic sharing, for being honest and vulnerable with each other, for really showing up with who we are as humans, beyond maybe the project or the work that we're doing. And in that way, being together in exchange, in conversation, in listening, and just being with each other. And I think if we do that enough on a one-on-one level, we increase those, relationships, this flow between people. And then we come to this place where the relationship web in a group or in a team is also stronger. And I think I have kind of like almost like an energetic sense sometimes of like the web of relationships. And if I feel some weaknesses or gaps or holes in it, I think maybe some other people also have that kind of sensitivity, and I'm sure it can be trained and practiced. But anyhow, I think in having space for one-on-one connection to increase the quality of relationship is always a good start in any kind of group.
So in a way, Laura, just to repeat it and to check if I got it wrong. So if you would come into a space of a group, of a team, of a company, you would first look, where is the weakest relationship between two individuals?
Yeah, I think that's one perspective. There are multiple perspectives and all can be really supportive in more creative, more capable teams. And I think this is one, really looking at seeing that any group or team or organization is basically a living social system. And social systems are based on the relationship of the individual parts, and that impacts greatly how the system functions, how the organism, how our body functions. They need to be all connecting and collaborating. If like my heart has beef with my liver and they don't work anymore, it's going to be really harmful, right, to the whole system. And I think we don't really realize how much of our like individual and interpersonal tensions and conflicts are actually not such a private matter at all. I think they, and I think in a different, level of consciousness, they're actually very collective and very transpersonal because they impact the whole team and the whole group. So yes, I think one aspect, one perspective is to look at that and to continuously work on the quality of relationship between people in any group or organization. And, that's not the one solution to solve it all, but I think it's one aspect that's really important. Yeah. And I think another one is also related to connecting with people is also communication. So I think as a social system, we need, some practices for clear and for empathic communication. And in that, I think if we bring that to the next level, it really, communication is that kind of exchange of energy and information that really allows the whole organism to like hear and understand and see itself. If every part of the organism is communicating and sharing their piece of information, their look on something, together you really get a picture, whether you're looking inside or outside. You can get a clearer picture of what's happening within an organization by really checking in what every individual can see and understand and sense. Or also by understanding more of some outer, project or environment or challenge that you're looking at. If you consider all those different things, you can really increase the capacity of response if you have good and clear flow of communication. And I think what often happens, and that connects again to the individual level, is that our communication has like double or triple layers, you know. Maybe I'm saying no to a certain suggestion, but I'm actually scared of what might happen, right? But I'm not communicating that. So I think we create like fog in our way, in our communication channels, if we don't practice that to have more kind of transparent and clear communication, I think it just impacts the kind of level of organism functioning that we can create in groups.
So, I mean, what you kind of really bring to our awareness is that communication really happens on different levels. It's communication from mind to mind, it's communication from emotion level, from feeling level, heart to heart, from energy level, and that we can develop a certain awareness where we are aware of our own information, from where do we get it, our different maybe likes and dislikes, and then being really aware of what I communicate then to another person. So it has really, as you said, it has different levels.
Yeah, and I think communication is a way of exchanging and of information to flow. And I think good information flow is really important for like a complex, high functioning living system, whether that be a human body, the different parts need to be exchanging information. That's why we have such an incredible, massive nervous system. And I think we need the same in social systems. We need really good ways of communication. And as you said, like, I think it's important to fully bring in the individual perspective, to not hold back, right? To not be scared to share what you sense, in your system, from your perspective. We need that, because if individuals hold back, we're missing out on bits and pieces. But at the same time, we need enough, let's say, personal maturity to be aware of, like, what's my story, what's my belief, what's my filter, what's my past perspective that is really maybe also clouding what I can see and sense and thus communicate. And again, it's not easy, but I think it's a practice to have that kind of communication and to practice this together. And I think it's a key enabler. Like, clear and good communication is a key enabler for collective intelligence, for higher efficiency and creativity in teams and groups. And it connects to what you said, like also sensing in, like, what am I sensing in my thoughts, in my feelings, in my body, also in the field? What am I sensing in the other person that maybe that person is currently unaware of? I think we also, we have not just the ability, but also the responsibility to sense into ourselves, our own inner worlds, but also into the outer world, into the other person and into the field, and to really give voice to what we're sensing and what we're feeling. And I think, again, this is maybe a third key factor in higher functioning of social systems, that we have that kind of sensitivity to our individual and also our collective field, and really can pick up tensions, information, energy from there, and use it to navigate, use it to come to a new solution or agreement that hasn't been there before, because we can consider so many more perspectives if we not just think in silos of who I am and what I like or don't like, or what I've experienced that it works, or what I'm scared that it might not work, what is my comfort. But if we can kind of widen our own sense and our own perception, we can include more perspectives, more people, and also a whole group field or a planetary field even. And I think this will give us a very different angle on what we do and how we do things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, the relationships for really high synergy, the clear communication channels, then also what I said now, kind of sensing into the self and to the group field is really important. And I think another factor is also kind of like a playfulness and a sense of always learning and experimenting together, of discovery, of research. And I think if we can kind of encourage a more playful, experiential culture in our groups, this will also be a great enabler. Because that's basically what evolution does, you know. You just do something, you see, oh, it works, doesn't work, you keep going. You don't judge. It's no point in judging. It's just you integrate the feedback, and the world and people give us constantly feedback. You know, it's like a free feedback generator, and then you keep going and you adapt and you take small, tiny steps and you test. And I think we humans, I think this is another way we really see where we're taking our minds way too serious, you know, to plan and predict and calculate everything instead of trying things out, you know, and experimenting and seeing and then adapting into responding the results and fine-tuning. And I think this is another thing, if we can establish more of a kind of discovery-driven learning in groups, this will also be a great way for us to respond to the challenging situations that we're in, to the changing business field and our maybe, you know, innovative products or services that we might be creating, to the always changing social dynamics within communities or groups, and to also the different necessities coming up in our ecosystems and the planets. You know, we need to be really rapid learners right now. And I think this is a key thing, like learning, this is what will also really help us to evolve if we increase our capacity to learn and to learn together. Yeah, so I think for me this is another key thing. Also what we can learn if we look at evolution happening in nature, you know, it happens in small tiny steps. It happens without judgment. It just follows what works and what doesn't work and continues with whatever works. It doesn't stop. It's very persistent, you know. It doesn't give up because the you know, the first 3 tries didn't work, so bad idea, you know, let's quit. No, it keeps going. It's very persistent. And for me, that looking at some of those like natural patterns of evolution can be very inspiring, to be like, okay, you know, just keep going. Take the next like, small step, not big jumps, not big innovations, no, small steps, building on top of each other. You know, we're never really, I think evolution also shows us we're never really creating something new. We're just slowly building on things, and then they create higher connection, and that creates the synergy. And from the synergy, we have a phenomenon called emergence. And emergence is also like, it's kind of new, but it's not really new because it comes out of the interconnectedness and system of parts linking up to each other. And then they have a new property or a new skill or a new capacity that hasn't been there before, but it comes from everything that's been there before already. And I think evolution works like that. Like it, you know, it doesn't really have something new. It just works with what is. This is also what we have to do. We have to work with all the different parts that are already there and build them and connect them in ways together that something new is possible. And that's also emergence, and that what we can do with more kind of innovative learning and also applying design in our different groups. And with that, we can create things that haven't been possible before. And I think for this kind of like emergence and innovation to really work, we need to create spaces where we can listen, where we can share, where we can just bring up ideas. And I think this is also a way to really activate the group creativity, to come back to that. If we, you know, sit together in a group of people, you know, on the ground, around, you know, on chairs, whatever, and we start sharing around an intention we have, like a shared intention or purpose, a necessity that we see, a problem maybe that we have, and we just start to like brainstorm and heartstorm and share our ideas, and we listen to each other, and we don't start discussing or arguing or, you know, judging different ideas. We just start building on top of each other, kind of maybe in a chaotic way. But I think out of that can also come really new possibilities, because we keep talking and sharing and bringing in ideas, and then at some point we don't have any ideas anymore. You know, we don't have any options anymore. We came to the edge of what we know we could do, and then we just keep going. You know, we keep going because evolution doesn't know where it's going. You know, we need to find some way to connect to what we don't know and keep going. And we bring in ideas, maybe some really absurd ones, some really crazy ones, and then maybe after that we actually get in that flow where new things emerge, where we say something we never thought before. And that's, for me, that is, emergence happening in groups. That can happen in such a like creative, possibility focused environment. If we don't just focus on what's not working and what's the problem, if we focus on what's possible, and if we connect deeply enough to what we don't know and keep going beyond what we know, we can really come to a place where we discover new possibilities that come out of the group, that is maybe an idea or an option that no single individual ever thought of, that nobody knows, that nobody has ever done, that you wouldn't have thought of your own. But it comes out of such a creative conversation that's focused on possibility and embraces and dares to go into a space of not knowing, to not stop with what we know, but to keep going together into a space where we don't know anymore.
And I mean, Laura, when I listen to that and when I look at, let's say, traditional learning spaces, and when I listen to you, I get a totally different image of how a learning space would look like. So basically, how we used to know learning spaces is where someone shares something and others listen to it and apply it. But your sharing of learning space is so different, and what is so different is also that the unknown has really a huge place in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think honestly, everything else is not really learning. It's sharing best practice. And that's cool. Like there's a place for that. There's a value for that. It's really awesome that people that have certain skills and experiences, they share that. I think that's great. That's a form of teaching where you get the things that work, and we can keep using the things that work. Like, I think that's not bad at all. That's fantastic. But it's not really learning in that sense. I think learning always starts when you go to a place where you don't know, where you've never been before. You go over that edge to something you've never done before, and then you take the next step. You explore a topic and you go to the next question that you don't know the answer to anymore. And so this is where real learning happens. And I think a lot of people are they're afraid. And they have a relationship with fear that stops them from going there. So for me, the key thing, and this is actually, I'm actually really glad that we're coming to this point, because I truly believe and know in my body that the fear is so important for evolution. So important. It's like the companion of evolution. I mean, of course, if you go somewhere, if you explore something, if you do something you've never done before, you're gonna be scared. That's such a normal reaction, and it's good. It shows you that you're stepping over that edge. It's a very clear indicator of, okay, now we don't know what we're doing anymore as a company. We're challenged in a situation, we don't know how to do it. Or personally, like now I'm in a step in my relationship, in my career, I've never been before. I don't have any experience to reference. I might be able to ask some people to get some inspiration, but I'm basically entering new territory. And who's there? Fear is there. Right at my side, of course. So I think whenever we talk about evolution, we need to look at our relationship, our partnership with fear. And I think this is also a place where we need a shift. To reprogram, to not connect fear, that fear is bad, that fear paralyzes us, that it blocks us, that it makes us insecure and unable to do things. So we need we need to download a new program also for fear. So it's a new program that says, okay, fear is fear. Okay, I'm feeling scared right now. Okay. Yeah. And then use that energy and information that the fear gives us to maybe sometimes stop doing what we're doing. Yes, that can also be that the fear really shows, okay, this is a risk, this is a danger, pay attention. But in any way, what fear always does is makes us more sensitive, makes us more aware, makes us more perceptive to ourselves and to our environment. Like a higher alertness, a higher sensitivity in all our five senses. Awakeness, exactly. And I think this is definitely like, this is the basic way. If you can be with fear in that, and then you can assess, okay, is this a risk? Is this the danger? Is it about really stopping or going another way because fear shows us, okay, this is not possible? Or does it just show us, this is new territory, this is something we've never done before, and the point is to keep going, because this is the only way we can really evolve, if we're willing and ready to partner up with our fear and to go to the places we've never been before.
Mm-hmm. And what comes to me also with that is really the spirit of adventurer, is really kind of cultivating joy of how the excitement and the aliveness which comes when I enter territory where I don't know. I mean, many people pay a lot of money to enter that territory, and we are in a time where we could enter that territory really all the time.
Yeah, and again, I think how you perceive fear comes back to the program of fear you have. You know, the feeling of fear can be the same sensation, but you interpret it according to the program that you have. You know, you can feel it as like utter aliveness and vitality and excitement and adventure, and you can feel, you know, have the same feeling of fear, but you can experience this as paralysis, as shock, as block, as really being scared, you know, as like tension. And I think the reprogramming is a big part, and then practice being with fear, and again, you know, building some skill or some capacity to be with a little bit of fear, and then maybe a little bit more of fear, right? It can be overwhelming, of course, but I think this is where the practice is important, to start, you know, being with a little bit more fear, to being more sensitive, to notice it when it's really small first, and to go with that, and to connect with like the small fears. And then we can, you know, expand our capacity until we can fully enjoy free falling, you know, to take that picture.
Yeah, and sometimes it might be the case that we need to take care of some kind of accumulated old emotion of fear, which really literally makes us stuck and not able to move. And maybe then we need to take care, how can we melt that in order to kind of really find a new way of interpretation with it.
Yeah. I think that's the second key part. So the one is the reprogramming, which kind of happens now, you know, in the moment. You can do that, and then you can, you know, with that new program, you can keep practicing. And the other part is maybe there is some past experience around that program. Maybe why you've kept that program, you know, like an evidence of why fear is bad and paralyzing and not useful for you, right? You can have past experiences that prove this program, this story you have about fear, and that limit your ability to create a new relationship with fear and any feeling for that matter. So yeah, and I think even kind of if you extend that perspective, I think for that shift we talked about, you know, for that evolutionary next step that can happen, and, you know, that's happening every moment again and again in smaller and bigger ways. One part is also to really like healing and integrating things from our past, things from previous experiences, because otherwise they will limit how far we can go. It's like we have still, you know, baggage and weight in our own personal timeline in our human history. You can also apply that to a more collective level. Like we have past trauma and pain and atrocities that we did, you know, towards each other and towards the planet that create kind of like stuck energy, you know, in our own bodies for our experiences, but also in our social systems, our social bodies, and also on the land, you know, that all has kind of like, almost has like a memory and is passed on. So I think this is another part to really pay attention to bring our awareness to that it actually exists, that some of the things we might be experiencing in our personal lives, in social, economic, or political things, are actually symptoms and maybe little flags, little notification windows of what's there that's stuck, that's not integrated. And again, I think it's not a place to ignore it. It's not a place to numb it or to judge it or to, get depressed about it. It's another chance to evolve. And I think in this perspective, evolving means looking at it, witnessing it, feeling it. Maybe it's something that we were not able to feel and process before because it was too much. And now we're in a place in our lives, in a place of who we are, that we are capable to do it, at least step by step. So also, this is not a quick fix process. Like I said, evolution doesn't make huge jumps, it makes small steps. So I think also that for that kind of healing and integration part, it's important to go in small steps. And
sometimes it makes huge steps, but the most of the time it makes many, many little steps.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the big steps are actually like an accumulation of small unconscious steps that we just didn't notice. And then we feel like the big shift or, the big flow, and it just comes in our awareness and we weren't aware of the smaller things happening all the time. And I think this is like what it literally does is if we're able to connect to such past trauma, let's just call it trauma or woundedness, whether that be on an individual or on a collective level, it limits our ability to move and to change. It's like a piece that's stuck, right? So if we are able to go back to that place, even if it might not be a physical place, but one in our personal or our collective field, and if we're able to remove the kind of filters that we maybe put around it so we're not seeing it anymore, to maybe remove the numbness that we created in order to, still be functioning even though we have it. If we're able to remove that, which is basically a process of becoming more aware of it, more sensitive again. So removing the numbness, removing maybe the filters or the mirrors that we put up so it becomes invisible.
The stories around it.
The stories that we have. So all of that basically, it's like a shutting off mechanism that's really helpful, because we can keep going. The whole system, the whole group keeps going, keeps living. That's really important in evolution as well. And if we have the capacity, we can come back to and remove this numbness, remove these layers of beliefs, of whatnot. And then we come to a more emotional level. After that, there is usually a layer of emotions, whether that is, depression, panic, fear, grief, sadness, anger coming up. There's usually kind of some emotions that are packaged around this. So, and I think this is the place where being with it and feeling it, even better in a relational space, by someone listening and witnessing you, by a group, seeing and feeling and witnessing each other and itself, feel it and process it. This is the part where the healing happens. And then moving through that, we come to like this core point. And I think only then a real shift is possible, where we really come to this core point, to this essence, where then we're in a place where we've processed enough, where we can really become something different. I think everything else is more, working on the surface. It's not really coming to that core. And if we come to that, usually the shift emerges. It's not something you've planned. It's not how you think. It comes through everything you've done and experienced alone or in the group. And then something else comes up.
And I'm curious because we touched really to an essence of where a turning point can happen. And maybe let's just be a bit there and be with it and maybe describe it. How do you sense it? How do you feel it? How do you know that I'm in a territory, I'm on a spot where I know that here shift can happen?
Mm-hmm.
How does it translate to you? How do you register that?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to kind of really put a focus there, because also in my work in supporting people in healing process, I also found if you reach that, everything is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would you describe it?
I think it almost feels like after like maybe the emotional chaos, there's almost like some stillness or softness that starts. It's also a way of seeing things more clearly than you maybe ever have. Yeah, it's a more kind of quiet, more calm experience.
I would also, what pops up in me is a vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
where I feel that kind of really my inside is turned outside.
Mm-hmm. I think it's that's what I described with like a softness, because some of the rigidity, you know, of that block from that past experience, from that belief, that limitation, is now it's like liquid. It's not it's not as solid anymore. So experiencing some kind of liquidness inside, and this is the space that's really vulnerable, and that's also really shapeable, you know, to come into a new form of being, a new, you know, a more empowering story or belief, you know, a more integrated past experience. And I think this kind of softness and liquidness, it can also be like, I think for the mind it can be confusing or blank. Like you could be completely blank, not
Like
really registering or processing thoughts. It could be confusion. It could be clear insight, you know, like the literal light bulb going on and you're like, oh, now I see it. Could, you know, could take different forms. I think in our body it's also often kind of more tenderness in our body, you know, maybe some tensions, but maybe also some release of tensions could be. And releasing tension also, I mean, can take different forms, from like laughing and giggling to shivering and shaking, and yeah, creating more softness in space also physically, because it's, I mean, you know, it's all stored also in our bodies. And
on
yeah,
a quantum physics level, maybe we would say we enter this space of probability, possibility, this, as you said, this blank space, but where you already can sense this capacity of the possibility of different forms and shapes and possibilities and transformation, and can emerge out of that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a space of possibility, and it's also, there's also kind of, yeah, like some, like a sense of possibility or movement or freedom. I think there's not such a strong presence or identification with what we said, like the stories, the beliefs, your like weaknesses or limitations. I think this is also like within that kind of liquid state, those are not so present anymore, and maybe some are literally dissolving. And I think this is also like an indicator of you being more in a space of just being, and less in self-identity and certain, you know, more solid beliefs, because, you know, those are being liquefied and melted in that kind of process. And I think this is where really something new is possible, because you become somebody new.
Yeah, and often it's also accompanied with this notion of feeling, that's kind of where that's my origin, that's my, that's also can be a sense of where I feel home, where I feel I'm coming from that place. That's my origin in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can feel scary again, maybe because you don't know it. It can also feel what you said, like deeply being at home.
Nice. Wow.
And I think, you know, in our evolution as humans, we've went through those stages before, I think, right? That's this kind of, you know, becoming liquid, this kind of shift is happening, you know, many times within a larger evolutionary picture. And what we've discussed of evolution becoming conscious of itself within us as human beings, you know, reaching that level of consciousness where we can perceive it, where we can experience it while it happens. That's for me the consciousness. Not just knowing that it exists, but actually being aware of it while it happens. And I think
choosing and moving with it.
This is what I wanted to say. And I think what we can even further kind of move into is that we utilize more that pulling, that inspiration drive of evolution by, you know, voluntarily doing those upgrades, choosing to go where our fear tells us to go, you know, choosing to deal with a topic that's maybe challenging, to focus on individual or collective trauma, to look at the things where there's tension, you know, not look away, but look towards it. Because then we're like, you know, facing and dealing and relating to those things, whether it's the tensions, the conflicts, the trauma, the unconscious parts, all of that we can choose to look at, to focus on, to embrace it. And I think we will, you know, become better in navigating this shifting, this becoming liquid, this melting, this moving, and it will become more of our experience and reality of what it means to be human, you know?
Yeah, and
we are capable to do it.
Yeah, and then really comes this then becoming co-creators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so together with the impulses we get, together with this pull we feel towards something, and then bringing all our resources into that and making possible that some new forms arise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the co-creation, one thing I want to emphasize, I think it kind of came through before, but I think it's a key thing, is being creative is only possible when you interact, where you're in relationship with things around you, right? That's how you doing something or saying something has an effect, because you're in relationship. So co-creation and us being co-creators means also being very aware of our interrelatedness, of our interbeing with everything and everyone around us. That's like the foundation for then, you know, belonging and being part of something, and then being part of creating it, the new form every moment. So I think this is an essential part of this shift, is also becoming increasingly aware and, you know, embodying more our profound interbeing with the world. And this is a really different step, you know, if you are talking to and engaging with the group with an, you know, some percentage of your awareness as I am the group, you start to interact and speak in a very different way. You know, I'm part of that group. I'm like one little cell, part of that bigger social organism. I'm one little cell, part of a bigger planet Earth. If you keep some percentage of your awareness, you know, all day, why not? All day, focused on that interbeingness, on that being part of. I think this is only where real co-creation becomes possible. If we still see ourselves as separate, as something outside, as like an observer, as an actor doing something to something else, I think we're missing a key point there. So I think the interbeingness is a key realization into real co-creation, looking at that word.
And then to bring it further, not just a realization, but really a matter of practicing it, as you kind of offered, really being aware that all day long that I'm a crucial part in the huge field and the organism of the whole planet and the whole universe, basically. And all my movements, all my thoughts, my
have an
feelings, my
effect.
activities, my how I am, do influence everything.
Yeah, and also, that there's nothing too small or too insignificant. There's nothing bigger and better, or it's all small things that of course make a difference because they're interconnected. And also, I think what it also means to me, looking at that practical level, it means that every small little thing I do, and maybe more important, so how I do it, how I think about it, how I speak about it, is significant. It makes a difference. And if we can come to a place where we embody this interbeingness, with, keeping some percent of our awareness on this, having maybe other certain practices that support it, we can really come to a place where we use like every small moment to create the kind of world that we want to create in a bigger sense. If we not just shift, like big plans and whatever, but the small things, if you say, one of my vision is to have, a more like loving and compassionate, way of relating. How can I do that in every small word that I say to a person? In every look, in every invitation I make, in every question I ask, in every touch that I have. How can we really embody the kind of purpose, the kind of calling, the kind of vision that we might have, and bring it alive in every single moment, in every small thing that we do? And I think this is for me also like a consequence, basically, of realizing that interbeingness and the significance of the small things, which, yes, quantum physics has given us some, intellectual understanding of how that works. But, it's been discovered about 100 years ago, and it's not really embodied yet because it's not enough to intellectually understand it. And it takes a lot of, shifting and melting down of old programs and installing the new ones to become someone who can live it more. And I think, again, this is part of the evolutionary shift that we're in.
That's such a wonderful reminder what you just brought, and it's for me of such great value that I really want to repeat it in a way, is that kind of that we can, the quality and the atmosphere and the attitude and the vision of what we want to see in this world, we can really bring that to every action, every interaction, everything we do with everything we are. Yeah, that's for me really such a wonderful reminder what really everybody can practice from when you wake up till you go to bed.
Yeah.
And not only put it on certain projects, on certain big visions, or in your work life or in your creative projects, but really practice it all day long with everything. That's it's really landing. I sense that's so powerful, and that's beautiful.
Yeah. I think this is the work, this is the real work, in all those small things. And this is also the very practical way of expressing, those qualities or those, visions that we have in every single moment. Like, why wait? Because we have some big plan, because we have some picture of how it's supposed to look like. I think it's more important
for the right people and circumstances.
Waiting for the right people. Yeah, and I think I have to come back to also say that, evolution is tapping into the new, is using the fear, what we said. It's about improvising. You're never gonna be or feel ready for it. It's never gonna be the perfect circumstances. It's just not gonna happen. You have to take that extra step, into the unknown with the fear, when it's just about good enough. And you, baby, don't feel ready, this is like, take the next step, you know, and just about ready enough is good enough. It's good enough to take the next step. Of course there's timing, and of course there are things that are not ready, but it's not about waiting for the perfect circumstances.
Yeah,
it's about making it, really bringing it alive in all the small things right now. Maybe in some smaller way, but that's fine.
Yeah, and in my experience, Laura, and maybe you share that, when you then start with the first and little steps and you do it, things appear. They come to you. People come to you. Possibilities come to you, which wouldn't come if you wouldn't start.
Yes, and because you're changing who you are being.
Yeah.
With all those small things, you know, who are you being when you talk to your child? You know, who are you being when you go to work? Who are you being with yourself when you get up every morning? You know, those small things that I talked about, they do change and form and shape who you are being, and in how you're thinking and speaking and acting and choosing all day long. And I think this is why the small things are not too insignificant. On the contrary, they are significant. And together, they create momentum. You know, like starting something and moving with it and practicing it and embodying it in small and tiny ways, that creates momentum, that creates movement, that, you know, gives form and shapes to other things along the way, along time. Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. That's I just love it. It's so exciting to talk to you with your experience, your creativity, your vitality. It's I'm so happy that we have you from this generation also joining the summit. And Laura, I also want to give you the chance to kind of share a bit, or maybe share about what are you really excited about in working together with people, and maybe what circumstances, what networks or what engagements are you looking for to co-create with, in a way?
Okay. I want to kind of draw like a circle with the last thing that we talked about, and something you're mentioning, the aliveness and creativity. This is for me like a natural effect. If we align more with evolution, if we align more with life and, you know, all those patterns, there is more aliveness. There is more creativity, there is more flow, there is more love, there is more synergy. And I think this is a great indicator, because we can, like, you know, actually experience that in our lives. And it can, it can be also like a guideline and a support in navigating this path. You know, what makes you feel alive, you know, what excites you, and also how can we create things that support aliveness. I think so much of what we create undermines aliveness, you know, limits aliveness, blocks aliveness. So if you're asking what I'm really passionate, I think it's definitely also how we can co-create, you know, living environments, learning environments, relationships, companies, products, houses that support and nourish aliveness more. So I think this is something, and in a more practical way, I think I'm really passionate about working together with people also to look at an ecological level and see how we can support more aliveness there. You know, there's been quite a lot of destruction, to say the least, happening, you know, with regards to soil, with regards to water and air, to our plants and forest systems. And I think it's a responsibility now of my generation, of our time, to learn more about how we can support aliveness in those systems, you know. we talked about aliveness and creativity and possibility in people. And I think that's also very relevant for ecosystems and for our planet. And as we are co-creators and part and belong to that planet, we have a big influence right now on this because we're so high in numbers, because we have reached such a level of, development and technology and impact. So I think, yes, it's a big part of our responsibility. And focus of a lot of my projects and studies and work is on how can we design more socially, but also ecologically regenerative systems and environments. How can we learn from the natural principles and patterns? How can we apply them to be more in alignment with nature itself, with the aliveness? How can we support that? And I think that's a very exciting field of research, to not become a destructive force on the planet, but a regenerative one. To wake up so much to our actions and behavior that are so often unconscious, to become more conscious of them and then be able to influence them in different ways, to, what I said, nurture more aliveness. And I think on a planetary level, it takes the form of regeneration, which both incorporates the kind of healing and tending to what maybe needs more aliveness, but also the ongoing development of those systems, of higher aliveness, of the productivity. And then, and I think this is a part where we can also be co-creators. And it's a part where we can all have like meaningful work, regenerating our fragmented social systems and our destroyed ecological systems, and kind of letting our own inner aliveness flow over to those systems and how we create them, because I think the inner and the outer really reflect and mirror each other. We have a lot of that fragmentation also inside of ourselves, and when we heal our own hearts, we heal the earth. And when we heal the earth, we heal our own hearts, So for me, there's such a strong connection, such a strong connection between that more natural earth level and our, human and social level, that it has to come together. It has to come hand in hand. And
it's just our minds which make it as separate.
Yes, exactly. And I think, the interbeingness that we talked about earlier brings us to the point where that separation disappears.
So do I then kind of get it right that in a way, your excitement is to design structures which support vitality, creativity, co-creation, and you also mentioned initiatory processes and transformation, and you are basically open to do it on an individual level, in groups, in environment, in nature, because it makes sense everywhere. You can do it there or there. So
I think pretty much. And I think it's also a journey, and I definitely recognize that this kind of, understanding of the natural patterns, of design, of our possibilities of co-creation, they are true on all those levels, on self, on people, and on also the whole planet. And I think it's really needed and exciting to work on us on all the different levels. And I think the expression of it is different, but a lot of the internal principles and patterns are actually the same, or can be applied on those different levels. And and I think for me it's really, I think what I'm looking forward to kind of grow more into and explore in my own work is this intersection, where as people we work with a piece of land, for example, and we relate to the nature there, and we align with the different climate and environmental patterns, and we learn from that, and we can enhance the growth and the vitality of that place by aligning and following those natural cycles and patterns. And in that way, it will touch us. It will have an effect on us. So I'm really curious to explore that intersection more, where this really comes together, where it's not actually different kind of work, where it becomes the same work, where by connecting, with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet, and interbeing and being part and all of them, when it becomes the same kind of work and just an expression on different levels. I think that's for me a really exciting piece. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I sense it was really a very rich conversation, a lot of aliveness in it, a lot of movement.
Yeah.
And is there anything left what you want to share? Or you also mentioned that you have kind of a sheet about evolution. Do you think?
Yeah. So one thing that I did prepare, and I would be happy to share it, is some kind of, because we talked quite a bit actually about the more group level also. So I have a few practices that I've collected from my own life and research that help us to live a more evolutionary aligned life. And I think these are kind of can serve as inspiration for those little ways of embodying it every day. So I'm happy to share that. I think now you should be able to see it.
Mm-hmm. Can you maybe shift it a bit? Because now our heads are a bit in the words.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or make it a bit smaller.
Like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So yeah, consider that kind of like an inspiration or even a summary of a lot of the things that we talked about. And in that sense, I don't think it's necessary to go into any greater detail, but I just want to mention it and leave that with also all of the people listening and watching us as some inspiration of how they can bring more evolution into their everyday lives.
Mm.
So one first aspect is to cultivate gratitude and acceptance and let go of resistance and of fighting what is. Another one must be to cultivate playfulness, learning, and persistence. And we definitely talked about that one. And to let go of perfectionism and the fear of failure. As I said, nature and evolution just keep going. They don't mind mistakes and failures. They don't recognize them as such. It's also about cultivating openness and softness of heart and letting go of cynicism and feeling hurt. To cultivate presence and quietness and let go of distractions and our busy lifestyles. To cultivate sensitivity, creativity, and possibility. And let go of the numbing and of the victimhood. And what I mean with victimhood is feeling like we're the victim and basically not able to respond and forced to be or to do in a certain way by circumstance. And that's just not true. If we shift to that level of interbeing and co-creativity, that's just never true, or never the reality. So letting go of numbing and victimhood. It's also about to cultivate curiosity, questions, and not knowing. And to let go of judgment and being right. That limits us. Yeah. To cultivate a partnership with fear and to enjoy free falling. And to let go of control and the need for certainty. To cultivate humbleness and humor and let go of self-importance and taking things too serious. To also cultivate equanimity and authenticity and let go of self-doubt and the need to fit in. And lastly, to cultivate a capacity for transformation you know, what we said of like becoming liquid and shifting and moving, and also to surrender and let go of the fear of change and ultimately the fear of death. Yeah. So these are some, I call them guideposts, like anchors or practices or reminding factors or inspiration that can support us to cultivate certain qualities and maybe let go of patterns that don't serve us so well anymore in our everyday lives and in the way we relate to each other and the world.
Beautiful. That's in a way really a beautiful summary of our conversation.
Yeah, funnily enough, we've basically talked about all of those things while I completely, you know, like without, you know, having that in mind at all. But we came around to, yeah, almost every piece of it, I would say.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and as a last piece to kind of leave you with and maybe also come to a close with our conversation, I want to bring in something that's kind of for me, yeah, also like a deeper look and essence if we look at evolution, you know, the topic of this interview and of the entire summit. So evolution is the ongoing and ever-changing expression of love, of creativity, of intelligence, of vitality that moves towards higher complexity and synergy and possibility. So that's this movement that's happening. And evolution is now becoming conscious of itself within us humans, realizing our profound interbeing and following the impulse towards planetary transformation and regeneration. And evolution needs difficulty. It's not always going to be fun and easy, but softening in our heart and then love learning from every little thing in life. So this is for me somewhat also as like an anchor of relating to myself more as a co-creator and evolutionary. So I hope this has, you know, supported all of you in relating and being different to the topic of conscious evolution. If you remember that invitation and intention that I shared in the beginning of this interview. So yeah, I hope that conversation and different insights that we exchange could be of service in that process. And yeah, I really wish all of us to enjoy that journey together. Such an exciting time to be alive and to be in it together. And yeah, relating to it together, we can support each other to make that next step in evolution.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful image. So maybe some of us want to print it. So I would like to offer it as an PDF file, maybe, so because I like the image, I like the text. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So maybe you can kind of now shift again, not sharing your screen, so that we can kind of see you. Thank you so much for the richness you brought about this topic. So for me, it was really something very special having you here in the summit. And yeah, as you said, I hope you listening to the audio or watching the video, you can take a lot out of this conversation, a lot of inspiration, maybe really changing your attitude towards fear, as we said, really tapping into curiosity, vitality, really also embracing this notion of becoming more adventurous and embracing the unknown and really being aware of our connectivity in this huge field. I mean, this whole summit is about kind of activating these different dots in this huge web in and around the planet and the whole universe in order to support whatever new step we are going to move towards, really activating it and making us able to sense it, to connect with it, and to bring all our talents, our authenticity, our love towards it, and co-creating. So
yeah.
thank you so much, Laura. All the best to you, all the best to your projects, and was really great to have you in the summit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone to making this happen and to creating this more networks of links and relationship and synergy. It is really a key thing for me that also, you know, keeps moving me forward, knowing and being part of those kind of networks. So I'm super excited for this summit and all of the many people participating and sensing more that kind of being in it together that we really are. So I feel touched and I feel connected to all of you. Thank you for sharing that time together.